Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're very excited to welcome two special guests, Dr. David Knott, who's visiting us here from the UK, as well as Dr. Anas Al-Qassem from Toronto. Both are traveling as part of a national tour across Canada, visiting over 5 cities, making stops in Ottawa, Toronto, Calgary, and Edmonton. Please don't stop eating. We've got quite a packed or tight schedule, so don't feel shy about eating during the presentation. Again, we're thankful that you can all join us this evening to really gain a perspective what's happening on the ground in Syria, especially relating to the medical crisis. You know, in Syria, it's the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, the largest since the Second World War. We have a humanitarian crisis, we have a refugee crisis, and potentially one of the highest cause for alarms is the medical crisis that we're facing. Hospitals are now a normal target of war, and permanent members of the UN Security Council are complicit in the killings of medics. And these are not my words. These are words spoken by Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, just yesterday to highlight the very concerning state of affairs. The WHO released a report last week documenting close to 1,000 attacks on medical facilities in the last 2 years. But how did we arrive here? You know, when I go back, and I've been involved in humanitarian work for some time, I can't ever remember a time when hospitals and healthcare workers were targets and were under attack. When the conflict started, the Syrian regime spared no targets. Hospitals, schools, civilian institutions. In fact, in 2012, they passed a decree into law saying any infrastructure not under regime control is a legitimate target. So they legitimized targeting hospitals and healthcare workers and journalists. Anybody who was not in their jurisdiction was now a legitimate target of war. And they went on to attack health infrastructure, and their attacks went unabated. Nobody spoke out about it, and this continued on. In fact, in 2013, the UN Commission looking at investigating war crimes concluded that the practices by the regime were systematic, that attacks on healthcare infrastructure were systematic acts of war. The report now goes on to say that attacks on healthcare workers and medical facilities have spread to 19 countries in the last 2 years. And this has all happened because the world did not act and has given essentially a green light to say that this is now legitimate. Close to 1,000 attacks, the majority of them being in Syria. Close to around 40% of all medical attacks on hospital care workers and infrastructure have been on Syria. Close to around 700 victims between patients and doctors. So the UN earlier this month, just a few weeks ago, came out and passed a UN security resolution unanimously condemning and saying that we no longer tolerate acts against healthcare infrastructure. And if you've been following the news over the last couple of weeks, just recently a major attack on hospital in Aleppo, taking care of the last remaining pediatrician there, killing over 50. A few weeks ago, one of the facilities that Awesome Canada supports, a clinic, the majority, 80% are women and children. That was also destroyed, and not just a couple of days ago, multiple airstrikes took out a hospital, buildings surrounding a hospital in Idlib, killing over 60 and injuring a few hundred, making that hospital inoperable and having to send victims over an hour away to get treatment. With that being said, there is something that we can do, and there are things that people are doing. Perhaps, those of us here, we can't change the course of the war, but there are actions that we can take to stand in solidarity with the healthcare workers who, at any moment could have chose to leave. They would be the first ones granted visas to get asylum in other countries, but they've chosen to stay on the front lines. And it's our duty and our responsibility as healthcare workers and as people to stand in solidarity and provide them whatever support that we can. Today we have two excellent speakers who will talk to you a little more about what's taking place on the ground, what sort of support is being provided, and how we can lend some help. To get us started, I'll start with you with a short video on AWESOME Canada. AWESOME stands for the Union of Medical Care and Relief Organizations. It's part of a global network of 8 members across Canada, the US, and member organizations in Europe that all form together to provide immediate and urgent medical care in Syria. In fact, it's the largest medical charity operating inside Syria, which is especially important because most Western NGOs have pulled out. It is supported and receiving funded by the United Nations, the World Health Organization, as well as many other foreign governments. I'm sorry to say that unfortunately no such assistance from our own government.